to generate the carbon dioxide to give you the fizz in your drink. And guess what? Farmers, well, they burn natural gas to produce carbon dioxide to feed their plants in greenhouses. So the new system could eliminate that need for fossil fuels in these applications. And that brings me to our slay word, trenchant, folks, for sharp and intense. Aren't you glad we have such trenchant scientists and engineers working on our behalf? It does make you feel a bit safer. Well, it's also turning into a big business because the researchers have set up a company. It's called Verdox. They're going to try and commercialize the process. They hope to develop a pilot scale plant within a few years. And they're not alone, folks. Apparently capturing carbon dioxide and turning it into commercial products like fuels or construction materials could become a new global industry. That is the word from the UCLA, the University of Oxford, and researchers at 5 other institutions. They say the urgency is huge and we have little time to effect change. We all know that. The research is published, this particular research, in the journal Nature, the most comprehensive study to date investigating the potential future scale and cost of 10 ways to use carbon dioxide, including in fuels and chemicals, plastics, building materials, soil management, and forestry. Now remember, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says global warming has to be kept to 1.5 degrees Celsius over the rest of the 21st century in order to, and all the carbon dioxide has to be removed, folks, from the atmosphere in order to achieve net zero carbon emissions and stabilize our planet. Have a good day. Okay, folks, I am Carol Angela Davis. Now, the Democratic mayor of Muncie, Indiana, has been arrested, folks, by the FBI. His name is Dennis Tyler, and CNN reporting that Tyler's administration has been investigated in a federal corruption probe. Now, earlier this year, the city's former building commissioner was sentenced to 2 years in prison after pleading guilty to wire fraud and money laundering. Tyler's been the mayor there in Muncie since 2012, but did not seek re-election. Let's look internationally, where the head of the Iraqi military intelligence says senior members of ISIS are plotting mass prison breaks and a resurgence of their terror campaign while they hide out in Turkey. Apparently, Iraq gave Turkey dossiers of 9 alleged terror leaders, including top financiers with access to huge amounts of money to fund global operations, bringing me to our slay word, trenchant, for very perceptive. Why is it that the only people who are not trenchant about ISIS are the ones in the White House? It don't make no sense. All right, let's go to England, folks, where Prince Andrew has been accused of using the N-word. Meghan Markle must be really having a time over there. In a conversation with a senior political aide. Now, that is the word from former aide to David Cameron, Rohan Silva, who met the prince at Buckingham Palace in 2012. Now, according to Silva, he asked the Queen's son if the government department responsible for trade could be doing a better job. Silva says the prince responded, well, this is a quote, "Well, if you'll pardon the expression, that really is the N-word in the woodpile," unquote. All right, now you know where that comes from. Okay, by the way, that information came from the Evening Standard. The phrase comes from the early 19th century here in the United States, relating to slaves attempting to hide in piles of wood while they were fleeing torture. All right, and it's come to mean a situation where there's an unknown factor affecting a situation in an adverse way. Silva said this was the second Buckingham Palace meeting with Andrew where he had felt uncomfortable with the language used. Pray for Meghan. Just pray for Meghan Markle. You know she's having a tough time over there. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Get me on Instagram and Twitter. I am Carol Angela Davis. It's Wednesday, so you don't want to talk about your money, okay? Warning, warning, folks. Adam Data Solutions is the curator of the U.S. housing market database. It says the number of properties with foreclosure filings, folks, in the U.S. rose in October by 13% more than September. It's a red flag for the U.S. housing market. Foreclosure filings do include bank repossessions. There were 13,484 of those filings. That is the highest this year. Adam also reports that foreclosure starts were up 17% on a month-over-month basis. You should know this was the first double-digit increase in foreclosure starts since February 2018. Now, these starts happen when lenders initiate that foreclosure process. And even though foreclosure activity actually declined year over year, it's still a huge problem because the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is at or close to historic lows. So there should ideally be no problem with affordability, folks. That does bring me to our slay word, trenchant, for sharply perceptive. Be trenchant, people, okay? Don't miss the message. The economy is showing some very serious trouble spots. Now, last week, the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, showed evidence of a U.S. housing market bubble. That association's chief economist saying, and I quote, Income and wages are not rising as fast and will make it difficult to buy once rates rise, unquote. Apparently, home price growth is outpacing wage growth, pricing buyers out of the market and creating the situation for a potential crash. That is happening, folks, in 80% of housing markets in this country. And according to NAR, home prices, well, they shot up 47% from 2012 through 2018. But by comparison, your wages, they only went up 16%. So this is not sustainable. Since buyers cannot come up with the money to buy a home, prices are crashing down despite tight inventory levels, and sales of existing homes dropping 2.2% during the month. Sales of single-family homes down in September. The combination, coupled with weak wage growth, is bad for the U.S. economy, the U.S. housing market, and will eventually lead to a sustained drop in prices. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Have a good day. I am Carol Angela Davis from Georgia. A teenage girl there, while she's under arrest for an alleged plot to attack a mostly black the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, that's in Gainesville, Georgia, about 50 miles northeast of Atlanta. Now, police say the 16-year-old had written down what she wanted to do, how she wanted to do it, and she had procured butcher knives and other knives in preparation for the attack. It was her classmates who turned her in, and that brings me to our slave word, trenchant, for sharply perceptive. Thank goodness these students were trenchant enough to understand what was going on and then to go ahead and notify the police. All right, let's turn to Philadelphia, where mother Yelena Nehishevskaya, 63 years old, facing murder charges in the death of her quadriplegic daughter, people, yes. Okay, and she also, we should say, the 31-year-old daughter also had cerebral palsy, okay? Police say she died from a lethal concoction of medication and alcohol. Now, mom's criminal defense attorney says mom is a sweet and loving mother, and that the statistics of somebody surviving to the age of 30 with the daughter's complications are less than 25%. Okay, let's travel to Miami, where a professor who co-authored a book on organized crime, well, he is now accused of laundering millions in dirty money through his private U.S. bank accounts. Now, his name is Bruce Bagley, 73 years old. Police say he co-authored the 2015 book called Drug Trafficking, Organized Crime, and Violence that are using the prison system and surveillance and policing, folks, as solutions to economic, political, and social problems. All right, it includes politicians, prisons, the probation system, the police, the courts, and all the companies that are out there profiting from the feeding and exploiting of prisoners, okay? Swift justice led a prison strike to call attention to this problem, particularly in Alabama. And in April 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice found that prisoners there, Alabama, were tortured, burned, stabbed, raped, sodomized, and murdered, okay, in unsupervised dorms. Bringing me to our slave word, trenchant, for very perceptive. You don't have to be a trenchant person to understand that Alabama's prison justice system, it needs reforming now. You should also know that in April, the DOJ gave Alabama 49 days, folks, to adequately respond to the violations, and guess what? Alabama's prison system has done very little since then. Alabama is among southern states with exceptionally high rates of incarceration. Its prisons are at roughly 190% of capacity, folks. That's 50% higher than the level that the courts mandated for California, a state that is much more populous and should have much more people in prison. Alabama currently houses over 25,000 inmates in facilities that are designed to hold a mere 13,000 people, folks. You should know this: 1,788 African Americans per 100,000 in Alabama, they are incarcerated, compared to 767 Hispanics per 100,000 and 535 whites per 100,000. Interesting, since whites make up 67% of the population in Alabama, but only 42% of the prison population. Blacks make up 26% of the population in Alabama, but 54% of the prison population. Hispanics make up 4% of the population and 4% of the prison population. Get me on Instagram and Twitter. I am Carol Angela Davis with your cannabis news. The United States House of Representatives House Judiciary Committee passed the MORE Act of 2019. The MORE Act is a bill to decriminalize and deschedule cannabis, to provide for reinvestment in certain persons adversely impacted by the war on drugs, and to provide for expungement of certain cannabis offenses. And of course, there are quite a other few provisions in the bill, but those are the ones that you need to know the most about, at least right now. It would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act. Now, passing in the House Judiciary Committee, that is the first step, folks, in removing weed from the Controlled Substances Act and creating a tax to fund programs to heal heal the damage from the war on drugs. That bill does create a 5% tax that would be used to fund restorative programs and help the people who are most targeted by the war on drugs start new legal weed businesses. According to Representative Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York, the incarcerated population of America jumped from 350,000 at the start of the war on drugs to the 2.2 million that it is right now. That's a shame. All right, we should also tell you, and I'm sure you already know this, Black and Latino people are disproportionately jailed for these offenses. New York became the marijuana arrest capital of the world, with 80% of the people busted on minor possession raps. Come on, folks. Being Black and Latino, that's not fair. We all know that. Representative Jeffries says it can't, and I'm quoting, it can't be socially acceptable behavior in some communities that tend to be more affluent, regardless of race, and criminal in other communities that tend to be predominantly Black and Latino all across the country and in New York City, unquote. Now, a companion measure of the MORE Act has been sponsored in the Senate by Senator Kamala Harris, a Democrat from California. It has been introduced, and its backers are not only Senator Kamala Harris, but also two of her rivals running for president. That would be Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, and of course Elizabeth Warren, a Senator Democrat from Massachusetts. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis, and I've got your cannabis news. Now, this, folks, the vaping cartridges, I mean, let's just get with it. They're just not safe. New data from a California analytic laboratory, CannaSafe, it showed that THC vape cartridges may carry a substantial risk of exposing you to harmful chemicals. Now, the test showing that illegal market products, they do pose the most danger. However, even cartridges from licensed cannabis dealers can be unsafe if you don't use them right. Apparently, CannaSafe analyzed the vapor produced by the cartridges to see the toxins that are in the vapor after the cannabis oil is heated and vaporized and prior to inhalation. Now, all 6 of the illicit cartridges they tested contained high levels of potentially harmful chemicals, including one called Maui Wowie that had 1,500 times the allowable level of pesticides and 5 times the legal concentration of lead. Similar tests are currently being conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but CannaSafe Vice President of Operations Antonio Frazier, he said the vapor, quote, it had everything bad in it, adding, if you look at some of the data for fatal dosing, I'd be willing to bet that some of these are over what they, the CDC, would consider a fatal dose. Yikes. Now, get this, vapor from counterfeit cartridges manufactured to look like licensed products, Steezy and Kingpin, well, they contain formaldehyde and carbon monoxide. You know that'll kill you. The vapor of a cartridge sold under the illicit brand name Dank Vapes, it showed 7 different pesticides, trace amounts of formaldehyde, and significant levels of vitamin E acetate. Now, the CDC says that vitamin E acetate is the likely culprit in those lung injuries known as e-cigarette and vaping product use associated lung injury, or EVALI. 5 of the 6 illicit cartridges contain vitamin E acetate at levels ranging from 30 to 37%. Illicit cartridges also had lower levels of cannabinoids and terpenes, okay? Also, looking at the legitimate cartridges, the vapor from carts from regulated companies, they showed no harmful effects when vaped to a temperature consistent with that of a 3-volt battery. But when heated to a more powerful voltage, they even had the presence of harmful chemicals known as HPHCs, which are also found in tobacco smoke. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Watch out. Get me on Instagram and Twitter. Watch that vaping, okay? I am Carol Angela Davis. I've got your cannabis news. Okay, folks, Apple, you should know, taking steps to keep you safe from vaping. You can no longer hit up that iOS store and download an app for your vaporizer, okay? Apple has removed all vaping-related applications from the platform, though you can still use yours and you can still download yours again if it was already on your phone. Now, it caused the removal of 181 apps from the Apple Store. Now, you should know that you've never been able to get an app on the Apple Store that facilitates the sale of vaporizer cartridges, but Apple did used to host an application that controlled users' vape product features like the temperature, that you could also get some vape-related content, but the company ceased allowing apps in these categories way back in June. There have been thousands, as you know, of vaping-related health problems, thousands of cases of severe lung injury that appear to be tied to those vaporizers across the United States and Canada. As you know, state and local governments, they're cutting off access to certain kinds of vaping products. And again, of course, there's always those tremendous problems with vaping and teens. All right, we're going to go on to another story. We're going to travel to Italy, where this is crazy. This is kind of cannabis related. Feral hogs sniffed out a stash of cocaine that had been buried in an Italian forest by drug dealers. The coke was worth nearly $20,000. Now, police found out about the hog incident while they were investigating the murder of a 21-year-old Albanian drug dealer. The cops set up a wiretap to monitor the phones of a gang, and that's when they found out about this incident. Now, the gang is made up of one Italian, apparently, and 3 Albanians, and police heard them complaining about the hogs sniffing up all and using up all the cocaine. Apparently, the drug dealers had stored their cocaine in jars before they buried it in the forest, but that wasn't enough to keep those hogs out. I guess when someone wants to hog the drugs, they do it, okay? No word on whether or not the hogs survived sniffing all that cocaine. The 4 members of the gang, well, 2 of them were arrested and they've been sent to prison. The other 2 are on house arrest. Thanks for joining me. I'm Carol Angela Davis. I am Carol Angela Davis. I'm here with your Cannabis News. Illinois State Senator Patricia Van Pelt, you should know she's under investigation by the Office of the Secretary of State for her role in a cannabis company that she operates. Van Pelt is a Democrat and represents a district on Chicago's South Side. The investigation being conducted by the Securities Division of the Secretary of State's office. The issue is her involvement in a cannabis company where she hosts seminars promoting the economic opportunities in the regulated cannabis market, also offers advice on investing in the industry, and also operates an online business that does sell CBD products. Now, Van Pelt says she can help people become marijuana millionaires, but a disclaimer on the company's website does say that less than 4% of the people who complete the program earn enough in sales commission to cover the cost from CHA properties. Now, once those residents are